evening. Thank you for joining us. You've all got me this evening. My name is Steve Winston, and I'm the Managing Director of the NJA. Before we launch straight into the tonight's guest speaker and all that he will have to say, if you could please just keep your mics on mute, and when it comes to the Q&A, if you have a question, please use the virtual hand facility in Zoom. That's at the bottom, and you can just choose to raise your virtual hand. Much appreciated. And yeah, but let's kick off. I think we've got some people still joining, but we will go straight into the proceedings. We are going to be sharing a link which goes to Clive Hart, his fundraising activity. If you want to make a donation, please make sure you use the specific link that we will be sharing in tonight's chat box. Otherwise, if you just go to the organisation itself, that won't make its way to Clive's fundraiser. So please make sure you use the specific link. And as I say, that will be shared repeatedly throughout this evening, and it will also be sent to you tomorrow via email with a recording of the event. So without further ado, tonight we have with us from Sderot, a city which has gained fame over the past couple of decades, ever since Israel unilaterally left Gaza and Hamas eventually overthrew Fatah and took control and started to use Gaza as a launching pad for their rockets into Israel. So Clive is originally from England, from Wembley. He's lived in Israel for many years. He lived there after studying and lived as a lone soldier there, served in the IDF, and he is now married and living in Sderot since 2022. I must just say that just over a couple of weeks ago, Clive became a father for the first time. So from all of us here this evening, Clive, Mazel Tov. We look forward to seeing some photos. Okay, so as I said, Clive lives in Sderot, and the event this evening is titled "The Only Englishman in Sderot." I'm going to ask him about that. And Clive leads the town's youth football division, and he works with the Sderot Foundation, which is an Israeli organization that helps the community, its residents. It's committed to helping them cope with the consequences of being under frequent attack from Gaza. So without further ado, I am going to launch into my first of many questions for you, Clive. So, Clive, I've explained to the audience that you live in Sderot. What made you choose Sderot as your destination when you were looking for somewhere to settle?
Well, basically, my wife's family is from Sderot. My wife is part of a very big family. I think, as I said to you before, my wife's parents were both born in Ethiopia, and each one of her parents, her father's no longer with us, but each one of her parents was one of at least 10 siblings. I forget the exact number. So when you start to do the exponential maths, that does come to a big, big number, many of whom, the majority of whom live in Sderot. And by the way, I'm still, all the years we've been married now, I still don't know the names of all of her cousins and first cousins, and I do try. And I tell you, the embarrassing thing is she knows the names of all of my family, but I've got the world's smallest nuclear family, so it's not really a competition. But so no, this is why we're living in Sderot. It was funny actually. I always make a joke to people that and it touches upon the point you made. The title of the talk is that, I said, when people said, how did she persuade you to move to Sderot? She said, well, it's next to the beach. That's not true. She said, she said it was full of English people. That's the biggest lie ever. There's not one here. And just on that, Stephen, I should tell you, if there's one, Israelis have got certain great qualities, as we know. One of the great qualities of Israelis, they love to tell you that they're wrong, that you're wrong, and that they're right. When I first moved to Stephen, I was having my hair cut, and the guy, even though my Hebrew is pretty good, very good even, the accent always gives it away. And the guy says to me, he says, "You're not from around these parts," or the Hebrew equivalent of "you're not around these parts." And I said, "No." He said, "Where are you from?" "England." And I said to him, "Do you know what? I'm pretty certain I'm the only English person here." So he says by the way, this story is only 3 years old, and it's important to point that out, and you'll realize why in a minute. Um, he says to me, he said, "No, no, you're not the only English person. My friend Philip lives in our block. He's English." And he goes, he said, "But no, he's left actually." I said, "When did he leave?" He said, 1979. So I don't think 1979 counts anymore. As far as I know, the only English person here, Stephen.
Right.
The only
Okay.
English person.
Wonderful. So can you tell us a bit more? I alluded briefly in my introduction of you to what you do, but if you could tell us a bit more about what you do, and like I said, my colleague will share the link repeatedly throughout this event. But if you
So
tell us a bit
basically,
more.
in the in the 22 years living back in England, between having been, as you say, in the army here and then going back to England, I worked in professional sports, and I still do. I don't suppose we've got any Southampton fans on here tonight, but I do some work for the owners of Southampton. But I'd worked heavily in professional football, and I came to Sderot, and I said to my wife, "Let's see what direction I take myself in." I met the mayor in the gym, and got to know the mayor quite well. And again, when we started talking, the accent always gives it away. And he said, "What was your background?" And I said, "Football particularly." And he said, "I want to get you involved in the municipality sports department, because as we're going to talk about later, sports is important everywhere and to everyone. But I think here, getting the kids and the youth active with everything they've been through is even more important, and we might touch upon that." So I started working for the sports department, and then obviously the war broke out, and I know we're going to talk about the war heavily shortly. And there was an evacuation, as you know, which we'll talk about. And me and my wife came back very early to Sderot for a number of reasons. And the truth is, obviously, there was no sports going on, and it was actually very boring. There was nothing to do. And obviously, a lot of people were coming to Sderot, politicians from around the world, journalists, donors, all sorts of people, and they wanted to meet sometimes some of the policemen and the soldiers who had been involved in the battles of Sderot. And probably one of the great qualities of Sderot is not the level of English of your typical resident. And they're not people that could generally go and talk for 20, 30 minutes in English. So they would say, "Clive, is there any chance you could go and translate?" So there was a policeman by the name of Shy, and I went to translate for him once, twice, three times. On the fourth time, I can't remember if it was politicians or whatever turned up. He never turned up, Shy. So I said to the woman in charge who deals with it all, I said, "Well, what are we going to do?" And she said, "We've heard him say it three times. Just say what he would have said if he was here." And that's how it started. And gradually I did more and more, and was involved, as I say, in then some fundraising for some of these sports projects that are going on in Sderot. And now I work part-time for the Sderot Foundation, and it all kind of combines nicely. Because, irrespective of the war, socioeconomically, Sderot is not a well-to-do area.
Mm.
And the average earnings in Sderot are not high. And as we know, it was something I said to my wife when we came to England on holiday. I said, "Do you notice the difference between England and Israel?" you'll never see in England an ambulance go by, and on the side of the ambulance it says donated by Mr. and Mrs. Cohen of New York. I said, as you know, in Israel, every ambulance is donated. And Israel is a country that I wouldn't say couldn't survive, but couldn't survive without the goodwill and support of the Jewish community around the world. We all know that. You know, every month here, I'm hosting Jews from Canada, from Australia, America. Funny enough, less so from the UK, if I'm honest. And you know, they try and help where they can with some of the projects here to improve the lives of the people in Sderot. So, as I say, my time is split between the trying to improve the football, and not just because we want the next Cristiano Ronaldo to come from Sderot, which might or might not happen, but it's just so important to get the kids out and about and being active, and the parents not being scared to send them out. But I can tell you on a number of occasions, we've been on the football pitch doing training, and then you hear the Tsevar Dome or you hear the whoosh of the Iron Dome, and you literally watch the intercept over the pitch, and you know you're trying to get the kids to safety, and it's you're thinking there's nowhere else in the world where a football training session will look like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you for that. I recall that I think it was something silly like 15 seconds that people have to get to a shelter when the sirens went off. Is that
Um,
right?
well, Stephen, you know that joke, you know, when the doctor says, I've got bad, you know, bad news for you. You've only got 2 weeks to, you know, but I was meant to tell you a week ago. It's the same type of thing. In principle, they say you've got 15 seconds, which I
Mhm.
don't think is a vast amount of time. Unfortunately, you don't always hear the alarms. Sometimes the alarms don't seem to go off. So if you ask me in reality, you're probably looking at 8 seconds is probably a better bet. And having been I remember the first time I was caught outside with my wife. We were in the car, and this was before the 7th of October, but there'd been a few days of trouble, and we'd made it to about 100 meters of our apartment. And she heard the alarms. We got out the car and we hid behind a very low wall, and she was crying. And it was the first time it really dawned on me how bad it is. And you don't get used to it. It's not something you would get used to, and it's not something you can be blasé about either.
Mm.
And also, it's worth pointing out, this is something I had a group here today. Where were they from today? From Europe. There was a member of the European Parliament who came to visit us today, and I showed her the picture of a female soldier that was killed on the 12th of October 2023, a girl called Adi Baruch, who was doing her military reserve service, and she just couldn't get to shelter quick enough. So no one should ever make the assumption of saying that the Iron Dome is 100% foolproof, because it's a long way short of 100%. Plus, what we also saw on the 7th of October, and I know we're going to talk about the 7th of October shortly, is that the Iron Dome, and I'm not giving away any military secrets here, has got a certain capacity, and Hamas know that if they shoot enough rockets at the same time, the Iron Dome can't deal with them all. So
Yeah,
not easy, Stephen, not easy.
I can only imagine. Um, so Clive, are you able to share with us what your memories of that day, the 7th of October, are? What you were doing, what you and your
Can
wife
I
were
be
doing when
honest?
the sirens started, etc.
I will try and share it, and I know we're gonna. There's a couple of videos, obviously, Stephen,
Yeah.
which you're gonna put on. It's funny because I can remember what I did on those few days, and I'm happy to talk about that. What I don't remember, and has just become a haze, is when I knew about certain events. Obviously, particularly regarding the police station, it's just become a bit of a haze, actually. Um, but in a nutshell, me and my wife didn't stay in our own home on the 6th of October. A lot of my wife's family is quite religious, and we stayed at her sister's apartment. Who She lives on the second floor of a building, and she bought in the same building as where my mother-in-law lives. And it's the other side of the town from where we were at the time. So we stayed there on the 6th. We woke up like everyone else with the rockets at, I think it was 6:29 in the morning. Um, I can tell you we had a particularly worrying incident is that one of her brothers, who was single at the time, still lived at home with her mother, very religious. He decided, I'm going off to synagogue anyway, on the basis that every synagogue has got a bomb shelter. And obviously there's lots of bomb shelters dotted across the streets that even if you got caught out, if you're a quick runner, you might well get to safety on your way to shul. And then obviously when we realized that something didn't seem quite normal, we turned on televisions, turned on the phone, realized that something extraordinary was happening. And of course, he's now disappeared off the synagogue. Very orthodox, of course, didn't have a phone with him because it was Shabbat. And the next time we saw him was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I think he was lucky that he got pulled in. Someone sort of pulled him off the streets and said, listen, there's things going on. You need to get here. And at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he literally ran home. He doesn't really talk about it, certainly not to me, but I know he saw some dead bodies on the way back from synagogue. And he was lucky because I know of other people, and in fact, I talk about him sometimes, a man called Mr. Toledano in the northern neighborhoods of Sderot, exactly the same thing. He took himself off to synagogue and he was killed in his street by terrorists coming by. So anyway, that was on the Saturday morning, of course. I remember on the Sunday afternoon, there was a lot of people staying at my sister-in-law's, and I like my peace and quiet. And I said to my wife, do you think we could go back to our apartment? And she sort of reluctantly agreed. And her cousin, who lives in the next building, who's a policeman, said, I'll give you an escort back and whatever else. Because at the time, I didn't have a gun license. And I said, okay, we go back to our neighborhood, which is a far quieter neighborhood. The place was deserted. I remember my wife was crying all night. And in fact, I don't know if anyone saw, I did a live interview on Sky News that night because someone connected them with me. And I remember doing this interview in the mamad. The mamad is the reinforced room. And we're sitting on a mattress on the floor. And like, my wife wasn't in shot. She was out of shot, telling me, speak quietly with the people from the TV because there could be terrorists outside. And I was a bit flippant with it, but she could well have been right. Anyway, on the Monday, I realized I'd made a mistake, so we went back to our place. I think I started the morning by doing a live interview with, is it Nick Ferrari on LBC?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I've got to say, he was great. He was great, actually. And then the municipality announced it was opening one of the supermarkets because they were worried people had run out of things, which again I thought was quite funny because given it was Shabbat and Simchat Torah and what most Jewish mothers and wives are like, the chances of someone's fridge being empty 2 days later I thought was a bit sick. But anyway, so I decided I went with my wife's husband. He's American. So we decided to go to the supermarket, Rami Levy, if anybody knows the chain. And I can tell you that twice when we were in the supermarket trying to buy some shopping, there were rocket attacks, and the second one actually hit, part of the rocket hit the side of the supermarket when we were in there because all the glass front of the supermarket shattered. So that was on the Monday. I have a recollection of the Tuesday. I think it's quite an amusing. Well, I thought it amused me anyway. By the Tuesday, you're now feeling very claustrophobic with it all. Of course, you're stuck indoors. And I said to my wife, I want to go out jogging, and she's looked at me like I'm mad. Like, this is what you can think of now. I said, yeah, just. So after a lot of negotiation, it was agreed I could go running around the block. And I've been running around the block for a few minutes, and I see her up on her sister's balcony shouting to come in. And I sort of carried on the conversation running, and I could see she was a bit panicky. So I thought, okay. So I've run round to the entrance. I go in and I'm going, well, what's wrong? You said it. She said, it's just come up on the television now that there's a suspicion of more terrorists inside Sderot now. There's me sort of jogging outside. That was on the Tuesday. And on the Wednesday morning, the municipality sent out messages to say they were organizing an evacuation. did people want to put their names down? Obviously, it was something organized by the government where hotels were being provided. Um, Most of my wife's family did go off to hotels. We actually used a friend's empty apartment in Netanya. I just felt that was a better option.
Mm.
And as I say, we were only there for 2 months, which was very, very small in comparison to most people. Most people were away for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months.
So can you talk about that a bit more about, the evacuees, where they were sent, and
So, just to
are
give,
they all back?
you the numbers, Sderot's population was about 35,000 before the 7th of October. At its lowest point with the evacuations, it got down to about 5,000. Those who stayed, by the way, those who stayed, some people were people who had vital jobs at the municipality and the such like. Also, two of Israel's biggest food factories, Strauss and Osem, are in the industrial center of Sderot, so probably maybe food production. Also, I suppose the elderly and the obstinate, which we know can sometimes be the same demographic. And obviously that created challenges because the supermarkets weren't open, the pharmacies weren't open, and the municipality had to help get those people medication and food. And by keeping people here, it kept a lot of, it made a lot of problems. Also, there's something else, without giving away too many military secrets. Is that one of the reasons they wanted to evacuate the city was that they then removed some of the Iron Dome batteries that protect Sderot, and they used them, for example, to protect some of the soldiers who were literally in the fields waiting to go into Gaza, where there's no cover whatsoever. But what that meant was there was a lot more direct hits of rockets into Sderot than what there would normally have been. So that again was obviously dangerous and problematic. So yeah, most people went to hotels. The biggest number was in Eilat. Then there was Tel Aviv, Netanya, Jerusalem. But I think psychologically the hotels were very damaging. Um, Firstly, in terms of the education of the kids. My wife is a school teacher, and I always say she's the best school teacher in Sderot by a long way because she's the one who tries the hardest and gives the most to her kids. And after, was it about a week, she was told by the headmistress, they were all told, you've got to do a Zoom with the kids. Not necessarily to teach them anything, just to see how and I remember she spent hours preparing, and she had a class of 25, and I think three of them turned up. And that was pretty typical of the parents lost direction. Um, which was bad. And also, for example, down in Eilat, without going into too much detail, Eilat, as we know, is a holiday town at the best of times. And I know there with the teenagers, there was a lot of problems of drug abuse, drink abuse, sex abuse, you stick anything you want in front of the word abuse, and um, also, I believe domestic violence. You got to understand that people were put in hotel rooms where you might have a father, a mother, and three kids in a small hotel room, and it might be nice for a couple of days, but you're all getting under each other's with nowhere to go to, no work to go to, no school together, and I believe in terms of domestic violence and dare I say possibly divorce and breakups, this was sort of numbers went up. And as I say, educationally, you've got to remember as well that if you take a 14-year-old kid in Sderot, he's been through a year or 2 years of COVID and no proper education. You give it a year or two, and now he's got no proper education for at least another year. Then this is big gaps in their development. And I can tell you as well that the local university, even as far back as 2007, after 6 years of rocket attacks, did a study regarding the youth and the kids in Sderot. And they found that anxiety, depression, PTSD, obesity levels were higher than other parts of the country. And, I used to, as you might have noticed, I try to find humor in most things. That's my way. And you've got to understand, you go to one of these nice hotels, you get a buffet for breakfast. I'm sure everyone here has stayed in the Israeli hotels. You know what the breakfast is like. You get a buffet for breakfast, all for free, of course, a buffet for lunch, then you get a buffet for dinner. You're not outside being active. And sometimes some of these American donors, etc., that used to come and visit us in Sderot, I remember saying to them, like, what are you doing tomorrow? And they go, oh, tomorrow we're going to go to one of the hotels and try and cheer up some of the people. I said, are you taking them anything? Yeah, we're going to buy donuts and ice. And any chance of taking some lettuce and cucumber? You're killing them with kindness and you mean well, but you're not doing the kids any favors. They're not active, they're not doing their sports, and they're just eating out of boredom and so in terms of their physical health, there's no doubt that damage was done by the events of 7th of October, which I know you want to talk about some of those events now.
So just touching on the effect it's had on the kids in Sderot. When I say kids, I mean kids who are at school, whether they're under 10, over 10. Um, I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong. What they say about you mustn't assume, but are all the evacuees now back living in
Yeah,
Sderot?
I think, listen, obviously I haven't gone and knocked on every door, Stephen. It seems like someone's knocking on your door, but I haven't knocked.
It's just my dog.
I haven't knocked on every door. One thing I can tell you actually is that in September 2024, the mayor was asked, I think, by a journalist, what percentage of people have returned, to which he said 105%. And what he meant by that was that not only had, as near as damn it, everyone returned,
Yeah.
a lot of new people had moved in. And I know obviously Dahlia was here with some people not long ago, and if we had had more chance to drive around, it's not just a case of a few new apartment blocks, it's whole new neighborhoods are being built in Sderot. And the aim is, I think at the minute, the population I'm told is about 38,000, and the aim is to get it up to, so I'm told, 70,000. So people are still coming.
Wonderful. That's a good message to give. A good message to give to
But
the.
again, that creates problems of infrastructures that this, particularly I see it in the sport, but it's not just in the sport, is that the infrastructure is not keeping pace with the population size.
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. Listen, that's a problem of anywhere that's having a lot of development. We have it here as well. Um, so and is there any help, aside from what you do with the kids in terms of the football, is there any help that's given to the kids who are
Yes, so
progressing through
we have
school?
what we call here the Merkaz Hosen, which if anyone speaks Hebrew, the Merkaz Hosen translates to the Resilience Center. They don't like to use words like treatment or therapy because they call it the Resilience Center. What goes on there? Treatment and therapy, but you just don't want to necessarily use those terms. And I'm told it's the largest in Israel. And it's not just one building, they've got other branches and they take it into the schools here as well. And there's also an animal therapy center, which again, I'm going to give you one real practical example of some of the work they do there in a minute. The challenge here, if you said to me for the Resilience Center, isn't in terms of enough rooms or enough floor space, it's about getting enough qualified psychologists and therapists to help them. And I know there's big long waiting lists and they're trying to train up more people and attract more people to come and work here, but that's the biggest challenge at the moment. Now, I said I'd give you a practical example of the animal therapy center, which of course is very nice and it's therapeutic. And for some kids, sitting there and stroking a rabbit and the such like gets them talking, and that's great. But it does some really good practical work. So even before the 7th of October, the mayor told us the story. The mayor's got 7 kids, and he told us the story before the 7th of October that one of his daughters, they used to teach you in psychology that there's 2 responses to stress. There's fight or flight.
Right. Yeah.
There's actually a third one, which is freeze, which is do nothing. And his daughter suffered from that problem when the alarms would go off for the rockets. And as we discussed before, you've probably got 8 seconds to get somewhere, and she would just freeze. She wouldn't take herself off to safety. So they took her to the animal center and they gradually bonded her with a dog. And eventually they gave her the dog to take home as a pet. And what would then happen when the alarms would go off is that she thinks, I've got to get the dog to safety. I've got to get him to the secure room. And of course, by doing that, she gets herself to the secure room. So,
Amazing,
like I say, it's got some really practical methods of helping as well.
amazing, amazing. Um, Clive, are you? I think a lot of us will know here about the excuse me, the police station in Sderot that came under fire and attack on the 7th of October. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about what happened there?
I can do. Again, I don't know. As I say, I know you've got little bits of footage. Maybe you'll tell me when you want to put that on. So basically, the rocket alarms went off at 6:29. The terrorists got to the police station at, I think it was about 3 minutes past 7. You have to remember as well, Sderot is a relatively small town. There's no nightclub culture. It's not London or New York where, Saturday morning the police are dealing with, all the drunks from the night before. And of course, it was Shabbat, it was Simchat Torah, so it would have been a fairly skeleton staff on duty, possibly about 8 policemen, something to that number. About 28 terrorists got there. They managed to kill a number of policemen outside. I've got to tell you, some of the policemen they killed outside were not even policemen who were in their police cars. It was people reporting for the morning shift at 7 o'clock in the morning who had no idea that terrorists had infiltrated into Sderot. The policemen who were in the police station who weren't killed instantly got onto the roof. They thought that would be their best option to get on the roof. But you've also got to remember that most of them had a handgun with best case scenario 35 bullets in a handgun. And you're talking 28 terrorists, each with a Kalashnikov with hundreds of rounds, plus grenades, plus all sorts of other things. And of course, it wasn't a fair contest, of course. Um, what then happened afterwards when the yamam, if anyone knows what the yamam is in America they would call it the SWAT teams, but it's myself and Dahlia have got a very good mutual friend who was in the yamam for many years. In fact, he was here last week for my son's Brit, and I can tell you the yamam is the very best of the best. They came at about 9:30 to take over in the morning to take over the situation of the police station. They tried to recapture the police station, and in doing so, they lost men. They then came up with an ingenious idea of bringing a fire, what do you call it? A fire engine is what you call it. They bought a fire engine with one of those extendable ladders. And they managed to get onto the roof and get off the live policemen who were there at that point. This was early in the afternoon. Of course, they found some dead policemen up there as well. Um, and then a decision was made by the policeman who's the regional commander, and he got permission from the chief of police of the whole of Israel to basically bring a tank and to basically try and bring down the police station with the terrorists inside. I think the terrorists at this point realized that perhaps being stuck in the police station wasn't their best option. And I believe 15 of them were killed trying to get out the police station to get into the neighborhoods to go and kill more people. And as I say, a tank was used and then an Apache helicopter and then a big D9 digger. And basically the walls were almost like the walls of Jericho were sort of pushed down on the police station. And I can tell you every terrorist who went there in the end was killed, but unfortunately they managed to kill a good number of civilians, policemen and soldiers in the process. And as you say, it's become the symbol of what occurred in the city, really. And I can tell you today, actually, I was at the police. There's now a memorial garden there, which
Wow,
Dali visited just a few weeks ago. And the head, what do you call it, the chief of the New York police was there today to lay a wreath. And we get all the policemen from all around Israel, plus abroad coming, and it's become a bit of a pilgrimage, really, to visit the police station.
I don't suppose you've had anyone from our Met Police, have you?
Uh, I don't want to say no one's been because I wouldn't know, but I can tell you I personally haven't met anyone from the Met Police. No.
I think they're too busy arresting people for wearing mug and dovers. But, um, That's yeah. I mean, that's just we sit here and we hear you speaking like this, and it's just as it was back then, watching it all happen on TV. It's just so difficult to even comprehend what it was like to have been, to have been there. Um, so what in terms of you've got a town, or is Sderot a town or officially a city?
I don't know. I know that in England, they tell me a city is a place with a university and a cathedral. There's
Yes,
definitely not a
it's
cathedral
not got
here,
a cathedral.
and I've not seen a university. So do you know what? I'm going to say that it's a town, but it's
Okay.
a big
But
town.
you've got, 35,000 plus people there, all of who have lived through this. You've got the children that we've spoken about and the effect it's had on their education. But what about, parents and the elderly? Is there any help available to them? They've lived through what we all know is the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and they've been, away from their homes. They've had all the effects to deal with, weight gain, obesity, their children, not turning up for classes, having to homeschool them, etc., etc. All the pressure that comes from, living in a hotel on top of each other. We all love to go to hotels, but when you're, like you said, when you're in that situation, the novelty will soon very quickly wear off. So they've all come back to Sderot, 105%. Um, what's what help is available to these people to help them move on and to help them be as good a parent as they can be for their families, for their
Well, I
children?
think, as I said to you, obviously we have the resilience center, and by the way, it's not just for kids;
Right.
it's
Okay.
obviously for adults as well.
Mm.
Um, and in terms of the elderly, I can tell you the mayor is very big in general on helping the elderly here. So yeah, everything, all these things are available. There's no discrimination based on age, and they try and help everyone here as much as they can. But in the end, it's like anything in life. It's a question of resource, which can be space, it can be money, it can be qualified people to help. It's a mixture of all of those things, and the people here need help. There's no two ways about it. They've been through a lot when you put together, as I say, the 20, how many years of rockets? 2001, we're now 2005, 25, sorry. So you're looking at 24 years of rockets. And then the 7th of October, on top of that. So yeah, they've been through a lot really.
Yeah.
I wonder, Stephen, this would be a good time to
Yes.
maybe tell the story of the two girls.
Yes. So that was going to be my next question. Um, yeah, if you've mentioned the two girls in the car, so if you can speak a
So
little bit about that.
what I suggest
You'd
maybe
like
we
me
do,
to play the
Stephen,
video?
is play the video. I understand that most of your participants don't speak Hebrew. So maybe what we do is play the video on a fairly low volume, and I will try and talk over it as we go, which will give me a chance to explain a few more things regarding the 7th of October as we go.
Okay. Now, is that the 9.5 minute one?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
So just bear with me, and right, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, hold on. I think hold on. Are we at the beginning, or have you got it? I think you're 30 seconds in already,
Yeah,
Steve.
I'm just going back. There we go.
Okay, so if you put it on a low volume, so
Yeah.
I don't know if people can hear. I'm not sure if I can hear it, but I don't know if people can hear or not, Stephen.
We have a show of hands if you can hear Clive, and if you can hear the video at all.
I'm sure they can hear me, but I'm not sure they can hear the video, Stephen. Can they?
Can you hear the video at all?
No, I get the feeling they can't, Stephen. You're getting a lot of people shaking their
Yeah.
heads.
Well, we can't have it too loud, Clive, because then they won't hear you.
Ah, okay. So let me start to explain what you're seeing in front of you anyway. You're seeing in front of you a young couple called the Sweeses, and they had two little girls that you can see. Obviously, the faces are blurred out. And the pictures you're seeing of the video were from the Shiva immediately after the death of the two parents. What I can go back and tell you is that, as we said, the rocket started in 2001, okay? Many families have got into the routine of in Sderot that if there is a rocket attack, which normally lasts for 3, 4, 5 days, something will trigger it, is that they go outside of Sderot for a few days to try and basically sit it out. Now, what you can see here now on the screen, do you want to stop it for a second, Stephen? Because this is worth just stopping if you can. Okay, so I just want to point out what you're seeing here now. This is the main roundabout when you come into the main entrance of Sderot. You can see the black family car trying to make its way out of Sderot. This was a few minutes before 7 o'clock in the morning, okay? And you could see that 2 terrorist vans, each van with about 10 terrorists, came in at the same time. And basically, effectively, the family car made it past the terrorists. You're then witnessing something which is the most remarkable thing. And when I first saw it, I didn't even understand what I was watching. Is that the father, despite the fact that it looks like they had managed to escape from the city and avoid the 2 terrorist trucks, actually stopped his car in the middle of the road, grabbed his oldest daughter, who you can see in his hand there, circled, him carrying his oldest daughter. At the same time, his wife gets out the car and carries the younger daughter in the opposite direction. And as you're going to see, unfortunately, I'll ask Stephen in a minute to run the video, but not yet, Stephen. Wait. You'll actually see that he actually runs back towards the terrorists, and the terrorists shoot him on the pavement. He died in hospital a few hours later. And when I first saw this, I go, well, I don't understand what he's done here. Why would you run back to the terrorists when you've effectively made it out? Why would you do that? Now, the footage you're seeing here is taken from the municipality cameras, so there's no volume on the footage. However, what we've been able to piece together is that he didn't see the 2 terrorist vans, as crazy as that sounds, but he heard the alarms go off for incoming rockets. And to be in the car when the rockets land is very scary, I can tell you. And what he's tried to do is grab his oldest daughter and try and find a shelter or a wall to hide behind. And unfortunately, by doing that, he's run into the arms of the terrorists, and he's, as I say, he's been shot there on the pavement. So you can if you let it run again, Stephen. This is what you're witnessing here at the roundabout. You can then see this is the older daughter walking back to the family car looking for her mother. What then happened, as I say, this is people talking it through at the shiver, but what then happened, an off-duty policeman, but here you can see the couple here holding their 2 kids. What then happened was an off-duty policeman by the name of Gulima, who, by the way, was born in Ethiopia, and my wife's family knew the family well. He was on his way to work. He finds this scene at the roundabout of a husband dying on the pavement, a hysterical mother and the 2 girls. He grabs a citizen that was passing and he says to the citizen, let's go in convoy to the police station because the police station will be the safest place to go to in Sderot. They went in convoy. Obviously, first the policeman was ambushed in his car by about 10 terrorists and killed. And then the family car got a few seconds later. The mother was killed in the front seat by terrorists. The driver, the citizen, was killed. But the terrorists didn't notice the 2 girls hiding in the back of the car. At the time, they were 5 years old and 3 years old. Here you can see the terrorists now having shot at the father. They're going to now make their way down to the police station. As I say, this is the main entrance to Sderot. Here you can, as I say, you can see them here. Now, if we just, again, what you can see here, this is the terrorists literally shooting into the 2 cars when they arrive at the police station. Okay, so then, by the way, this lady speaking here is the grandmother of she's the mother of the husband, and as I say, the grandmother of the 2 kids, talking through what happened. And what you're now seeing is police body footage camera. These are policemen who went towards the police station to once the policeman had got inside here. Now, it's a shame there's no sound here, unfortunately. This is policemen coming to the car, finding the girls inside the car, and the girl, the oldest, in fact, you can see again, this is footage from a different angle of the shooting gang. These are the police outside the station. And I can tell you that when the policeman got close to the car, the oldest daughter said to the policeman, "Are you Israel?" Because she saw men with guns and she didn't know whether they were good guys or the bad guys. She then had the wherewithal to turn around to them and say, "I'm here with a baby." So they didn't leave the younger daughter behind either, which could easily have happened in the confusion. And you can see the man carrying them away is a man called Yair, who I know personally, and again, the soldier being interviewed was the other person who helped get the girls out. And as I say, it's become a very, very famous story. And what we're going to see as the video goes on, you're going to see the people that rescued her from the car actually going to visit the two girls a few weeks later to see how they were getting on. But it's a story that's become incredibly famous in Israel. Perhaps the most famous event of the 7th of October regarding Sderot. So we can just let the video run here a little bit. And I've got to tell you, every group that comes to Sderot always asks where the girls are and how the girls are doing. But obviously everyone tries to respect their privacy as much as possible. So sometimes people leave presents for them, and as you can imagine, all sorts of things here. As I say, a very, very sad story from the events outside the police station. As I say, you will see in a minute the men who got her out the car actually going to visit the girls. The other thing, as you see, when you look into when you look into the terrorist vans there, which you keep seeing on the video, you see how many of them there were, and also how heavily armed they were. As I say, the policemen on the day only had handguns, each one with maybe 35 bullets at best, and obviously was in no way any sort of a fair contest. So let me just stop the video 1 second again, if you can, Stephen. So let me just tell you who these two gentlemen are. This is Ronen on the left with his arm in the sling. Ronen was, he's not now, but he was the Rav Shutz of Sderot. The Rav Shutz is the person who's appointed by the municipality or the city to coordinate with the army. He's the if you like, some people translate it as the sheriff. He was one of the first people to get outside the police station and dragged a policeman away to safety that had been hit with a bullet. He himself was then hit with 2 bullets. And the man carrying the bags is a man called Yair. Yair is with me now, still in the Kitar Konanut in the Army Responder Unit. Yair is actually Ronen's brother-in-law. I believe he's married to Ronen's sister. And he was the man who you saw carrying one girl in his arm and the other girl, as I say, just by his side. If you want to let it run again, Stephen. And this was when they went to visit the 2 girls just a few weeks afterwards to see how they were getting on. And obviously, when you see them with the grandparents and you just sort of wonder, I don't know how many times the grandparents can keep saying, say thank you, but I just imagine it's just something that repeats every day. And certainly the older sister will have very clear recollections of the day because, like I say, she was very, very switched on, the older sister there. You can see her standing up there in the green t-shirt. And it's something in Sderot that everyone that comes to visit, this is the thing everyone wants to know about, is the 2 girls, really. Please God, they should be okay. And then, as I say, they're being looked after by grandparents and aunties and the such like. Maybe, Stephen, I don't know if you wanted to put on the other video as well, which again, I'll talk over the other video,
Yep.
which is a far smaller video. what I can tell you, while Stephen puts that on, is that the army has conducted its inquiries into every kibbutz and the music festival and Sderot. I wouldn't necessarily use the word to apportion blame, but to certainly try to understand what went well or what went badly on the 7th of October. Needless to say, in most cases, it was things that went badly. Again, obviously, I guess we don't have the volume here, but again, Stephen, if you play it here, this is one of the very, very first sightings of terrorists on the morning of the 7th of October. Um, Again, you can see people literally filmed on their cameras. This was filmed by someone out their apartment window, as was this. All of these clips were taken on the morning. This is, by the way, that was the Rami Levy supermarket that the terrorists were trying to kick the door in. That was the same supermarket I told you that we went to on the Monday and was hit by more rockets when we were in there. This is the scene in the evening outside the police station. You can see the fire engine still parked up there. This scene here, let me just talk you through this. Hold on, in fact, you might want to stop it a second. Sorry, Stephen, I'm trying to talk through. Do you want to go back 10 seconds where you could see
Yes.
soldiers here? Go back a little here. Let's stop it here. So again, this has become a very famous and obviously very sad story. There was another group of terrorists who came through the industrial entrance, and they came across this minibus stood out, which was parked outside the library. The story of this minibus was as follows: that there was a group of old age pensioners from Netivot, from Ofakim, and from Sderot who were going on a day trip to the Dead Sea. And it was an early morning start. By the time they got to Sderot to pick up the pensioners from Sderot who were going, obviously the rocket attacks had started. This was the pickup point by the library. And the vehicle had sustained two punctures to the back wheels. So all the passengers got out the vehicle. They couldn't get into the bomb shelter by the bus stop because it was a bomb shelter with what they call a clever door, which is meant to open when the alarms went off, and it didn't work. So they stood there looking anxiously up to the sky. And in fact, you might see in a minute when I ask Stephen to play it, you might see the final photo that was ever taken of them alive. And then at that point, the terrorist van came along and it killed all 13 of the pensioners who stood outside the library. That's what this scene is. Stephen, if you just want to let it roll again. This is what happened here. As I say, 13 old age pensioners were killed. This lady here, I didn't know her, but in a minute, she was possibly the first Sderot resident to be killed. This is Albert Gabay speaking here. It was his niece. And I can tell you, Albert's son is one of our young coaches in the football. So again, I know Albert, I know his son, I know the family. And as I say, the lady pictured was possibly the first Sderot resident to be killed. She was out and about early in the morning. Again, these are some of the scenes of the police when they realized what was going on at the police station. Again, this is from a different angle here. And as I say, this was part of the report that in fact, you can see the man in the middle there was Ronen, who we saw before with his arm in the sling. What some of the problems here in Sderot, if I can tell you what some of the problems that are concluded on this report. Firstly, the Kitak Ononut, which is, in fact, this is the final picture taken of the old age pensioners looking at the rockets literally seconds before the terrorists came. What they concluded was that the Army First Responder Unit here in Sderot was too small, didn't have the correct weapons and hadn't done any training. I can tell you all of those things has now been amended. They also found that because of Shabbat and a lot of Orthodox people living in Sderot, they weren't able to warn the residents of terrorists obviously being on the streets. What they also found, which will be mentioned here in a minute in the video, is that because Sderot is the first big place you come to when you come to the Gaza envelope, by the end of the day there were close to 1,000 police and soldiers here, which sounds great, but it means that there were too many here when many of them should have gone on to the kibbutzim, to Kfar Aza and Kibbutz Be'eri to help there, and they didn't realize what was going on. Here you can see this is when they brought down the police station. This is what the police station looked like at the end, obviously. And you can see on the screen there the numbers of people that were killed. The top number was civilians, then it was people from the police and the army. And as I say, these were the main conclusions that were reached by the military investigation, which was carried out months later after the events. Again, you can just see some of the damage that was caused by the terrorists, that was caused by the rockets, and that's really a summary of it, really.
Wow. That's certainly a hard watch. I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling, or in feeling like, yeah, I don't think there's many words that we can put to that.
I'd be very happy, Stephen, if people have, as much as I try.
Yeah, no, absolutely,
People have some
absolutely.
questions.
So
Obviously.
we've got I can just see one lady, Caroline Green, has put her hand up, but for everyone else here, if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please do use the raise hand facility in Zoom, and you know, please do put your questions to Clive. So Caroline, can you please unmute and put your video on so that we can see you? Lovely, thank you. And if you just put your question to Clive, thanks.
Well, firstly, thank you both for this evening, but especially to you, Clive. Wow, what an emotional heart. I haven't got words, to be honest. In fact, my ex-fiance, who I haven't seen for many years, but I have spoken to recently, he lives in Sderot, and he had 3 Hamas terrorists in his garden, and he killed 2. And I don't know what happened to the other one, but I might have missed this bit, but after October the 7th, like on October the 8th, 9th, was it then clear that there were no more terrorists there? Or did it go on a few more days? That's what
I think it took because I think I don't know if maybe you weren't here early on when I mentioned about how I went out jogging on the Tuesday after the Saturday, because I said to my wife, I just need to get out the apartment a little bit. And then it came up on the television that there was a suspicion of a further intrusion into Sderot. So it's very difficult to get a clear, definitive date when you could definitely say there were no terrorists left. Obviously, it's trying to prove a negative, if you like. And there was an incident a couple of days later near the gym, where there was an encounter with terrorists. So it took a while for them to be absolutely certain there was no one left inside Sderot.
right.
And I can tell you something actually, that obviously it was people moved away, obviously, as we know. And there was a lot of people that when they came back 2 months later, 3 months later, 4 months later, 6 months later, were very scared to open the doors of either their home or their business, because they're thinking, what about if people have been held up, holed up there? So I know the municipality and the police, etc., had to help people in those circumstances sometimes to go into their properties and feel safe that there wasn't a terrorist who had held himself up in there for a period of time.
Right. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for this very, very emotional talk. And I actually lived in Sderot many years ago. And, you know, I don't have words. I've seen a lot from London, and it's horrific what's happened. And what really I'm hearing from friends and different groups is that, Israel's in trauma, and it's going to take many, many years, maybe even a generation. And, I want to help as much as I can. So if there's anything after that I can do or other people can do, I'd really like to do something, whether it's money, well, it's always money, obviously, but other things, I don't know. But thank you so much for your time today. And I'm really, obviously, very, very very happy that you and your family are all okay, and you're doing an amazing thing with the children there. So thank you so much, Clive.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Does anyone else have any questions? I have a couple more that I'd like to put to you, Clive, and then obviously I'm just mindful of the time there, so you're keen to want to get to your baby. Well, I just have a couple of questions, if I may. You mentioned when we were chatting via WhatsApp about the municipality and the IDF and their role in protecting Sderot. Do you want to just mention that a little bit?
Okay, so one of the things that was touched upon in the report that you've just seen the video was that let me explain to you what a Kitar Kononut is. If I had to translate it, it would be like the first military responders. And you probably heard some of the story on the kibbutzim where, you know, a small number of people. It's something that's run by the army, obviously made up of people that had been in the army, etc., etc. So the Kitar Kononut in Sderot was very, very small. Because of an administrative issue, they no longer had their long weapons, as in, you know, machine gun rifles. They weren't doing any training, etc., etc. So they weren't in any way prepared to deal with a group of terrorists that came in. You've also got to understand that the police force is very small, and the police in Sderot cover a large area of the Gaza envelope. It's not just in Sderot. So I can tell you that since the 7th of October, the Kitar Kononut has been grown. I joined in May 2024. Dare I say, I'm one of the very oldest in it, thank God. Most of them are younger than me. And I hadn't done any Army Reserve duty since something like 1999. So this is 25 years of having been out of the business, so to speak, Stephen, that I do it. And I can tell you last year I did 152 days of reserve duty, Miloim. I apologetically say that this year in 2025, I've only done 85 days. In any normal year, if you meet a man in Israel that says he's done 85 days that year of reserve duty, he's probably a general at least, if not more. And now we have regular patrols going on. We have monthly exercises. In terms of the equipment, we're far better equipped. We've got procedures for every event, and please God, we should never have to do any of these things. Especially if I don't know if my mum's still on this Zoom, but she worries about these type of things. So anyway, but anyway, we do, and we're trained to do what we would need to do if God forbid anything else ever happened. And thank God so far we've done a lot of drills. We've had some situations. I mean, I can just give you a crazy situation which must have happened in about May, whereby it was Shabbat afternoon. I'd left the phone on, even I think I thought I'd left it on silent. And then all of a sudden I can hear the voice. I'd gone into the bedroom and I could hear the voice of the person who took over as the sheriff. It was someone after the man with the sling, going, "If anyone can hear me, you need to report to a certain place." So I've come out the room with all my gear on, and my wife's looking at me, and my mother-in-law like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know. Something's happened. We've all had to go into report to somewhere." And believe it or not, some Israeli, and you've got to bless, you've got to love Israelis, what they sometimes will do, has decided it'd be a good idea to have a hand gliding trip on the Gaza border. And how he wasn't shot down by a panicked person, I don't know. Why he would think this was a good place to do it, I don't know. Obviously, thank God, before he was shot down, they were able to ascertain he was just, should we say, an over-enthusiastic hang glider and not a terrorist. But obviously, as people know, the terrorists came in on such devices on the 7th of October. But these are the type of things that, you know, we get called to, and not knowing at any given moment whether, as I say, thank God it's a false alarm, or whether it could be someone trying to do something far worse. So yeah, the municipalities to go with the army is obviously doing what we're doing, but of course there's a slight feeling, of course, that it's after the horse has bolted. Of course,
Of course, of course, of
this is
course.
the only thing.
But look, you know, from a perspective of moving forward, I guess there's some kind of, you know, psychological security to be had from that.
Well, I can tell you, for example, we have two vehicles that go around 24/7. I did two shifts on Yom Kippur, and we actually went round in a procession together with some of the police vehicles, and we went through every neighborhood of Sderot, just at the time when people would be going to synagogue on Kol Nidre. And obviously the purpose, well, it's funny, the purpose is to show, and obviously you're going very slowly. It's not like you're rushing off somewhere. The idea, as you say, is to give a feeling of security, but I've got to tell you, at least half of the residents shout, you know, out going, what's happened, what's happened? So I'm not sure whether you don't end up panicking as many people as you reassure, but obviously these decisions are made far above my pay grade.
No, that's a good point. Good point. One final question for you. Well, there's one. Rose Jenks has just come up with a question. So, Rose, over to you.
Well, thank you, Clive, for what you shared, and mazel tov to you and your wife for producing the first member of your own football team. But my question is, what, if anything, is being done for sports teams for the children of Sderot?
Oh, that's a nice leading question. So, Sderot, firstly, you know, the challenges in Sderot for sport are maybe similar to other places. Firstly, like I say to you, the city is massively growing in population, and the infrastructure is nowhere near growing at the same speed. So we're desperately trying to get another football pitch built because there's kids sat at home that have got nowhere to go and play, and we could have more teams at more age groups, and we can't do it. And in terms of, you know, I can tell you that you know what we charge the parents here for things like that is probably 30-40% of what they get charged in other towns for the same activity, and we have to bridge the gap through donations, and that's what we have to do to try and deal with that. I'll tell you a little story if I can, because I mentioned My Israel, and obviously My Israel are the people that have helped us with the link that Stephen is sending round. Um, is that I'll tell you a little story about the Krav Maga, which I think is a nice story. Is that my wife, maybe it's because her parents Ethiopian, she's got amazing genes. Okay, I don't mean genes as in the trousers, I mean as in genetics. And you know, I'm someone that needs to go to the gym at least 8 times a week, or I feel like I've put on weight. My wife was never really like that, and I used to nag her to go to the gym occasionally. Not that she needs to, but I explained to her it's not just about being slim, it's about being healthy, keeping strong. And anyway, that was one of our little battles, shall we say, before the 7th of October. And when we got evacuated on the 11th of October, I said to my wife, "Don't forget your sports shoes." And she looked at me with a very angry look, because I associate sport and exercise like brushing your teeth. You don't brush your teeth when you're in a celebratory mood. You brush your teeth because you need to. She doesn't see sport and exercise like that. And she said, "I'm not taking my shoes. There's people being held hostage in Gaza. There's people killed." And she's absolutely right. But I don't make that connection between the two things in the way she does. And we get to Netanya, and we've been there for a few days. And all of a sudden, my wife says to me, "I want you to find me here in Netanya some Krav Maga classes." I'm thinking, my wife, who I have to bribe and beg to go to the gym to stay healthy, she wants Krav Maga. So I'm straight away on Google. I found her a class, and it was mainly men actually. It was only a few women, and she must have gone about 9 times in the 2 months we were there, and she loved it. And the reason she wanted to go was, it wasn't that nine lessons is going to turn you into Bruce Lee, but it was to get her confidence back after what had happened here. And I had a meeting with the head of the sport, who obviously I work with on a weekly basis anyway with the football. And I told him this story. I said, listen, my wife is what we call in England the canary down the mine. If my wife, someone who, as I say, just doesn't, she's not a big fan of the gym and all of these things, she says Krav Maga will help her, you can be damn certain that when the population come back here with what everyone's been through, there's going to be a big demand. And I can tell you that we found an amazing guy called Shai, who runs a Krav Maga center in Netivot. He opens a center here in Sderot. And my Israel, who I've got to tell you, do tremendous work finding the small projects in Israel that people don't generally find. We all know about Magen David Adom and Hatzalah, which, by the way, are amazing organizations too. And we spoke to My Israel, and they made a very, very significant donation to the Krav Maga project in Sderot, which basically enabled us to let all the kids and youth, anyone who wanted to come, for just a very, very token monthly payment. And it's a program that's doing really well now. I know that my wife's nephew, who I think is 13, he goes once a week, and some of them are going 4 or 5 times a week. So we're doing what we can. Our limitations are always budgets. Our limitations are physical facilities to do these things. Obviously, finding the right people to coach and teach, which again, with the soccer, we've been really lucky. We've built a really good group of people that are coaching and working with the kids. And you know, we brought in a fitness instructor to the kids' football, which is quite unusual at our level to have the budget and the wherewithal to do that. But again, because of what we've spoken about, the health and the fitness of the kids here, we decided it was something we'd have to do. I can tell you the mayor has been, just to mention the mayor, I actually came to England last year with the mayor. He came on a visit to talk at certain places, and he asked me to come with. And he's someone who goes to the gym every day. He goes and runs on the treadmill. And again, he backs us because he knows. In fact, he was interviewed by one of the main one of the main news channels in Israel not long after the 7th of October. And they said to him, you're doing so much to help the 35,000 residents. What are you doing to help yourself? And he said, I say Tehillim every day. I learn a page of Gemara every day, and I go running every day. So the mayor is, I've got to say, has been very, very supportive in it, because he understands that the connection between your physical well-being and your emotional well-being. And but no, we're always trying to do more. Always trying to do.
Absolutely amazing. Kol hakavod. So if I can just put one final question to you. You know, we've spoken obviously this evening at length about Sderot, about October the 7th, about what life was like before, what life is like since. So for those who may be in this call and who are considering making Aliyah, things here in the UK have got that conversation going more and more. What would you recommend about Sderot? Would you recommend it as a new home?
Well, I've got to tell you, Stephen, that I bumped into, as I say, I see the mayor a lot, and I bumped into him in was it about May time? And he said, I need to speak to you about a trip to England. And I thought, oh, he wants to go to England again on another speaking trip or whatever. And when his secretary called me, what I actually discovered was he wanted me to go to England with the deputy mayor. And we went, it was in June, and at the Allianz Rugby Stadium, which I'm sure many of you know in Hendon, there was the annual Aliyah Fair.
Yeah.
And where you get people from all sorts of organizations with Israel, national insurance, the tax, educate, to give people as much information as possible. And there were 4 towns or cities that were given, if you like, the chance to have a table to present. I can't remember. I think it was Jerusalem, Haifa, Sderot, and maybe Dimona. I can't remember. I'm going to say it was those 4. And it was really interesting, actually. And funnily enough, the Sderot table was next to the Jerusalem table. And the person at the Jerusalem table looks at me and he says, I remember you. You were with me in school in England. You were a couple of years above me and whatever. And we had a chat. And I said to him, I'm so glad that the 2 tables are next to each other. And he said to me, why? He said, because people see Jerusalem, they see Sderot, and they're going to go to your table, and you're going to do all what I call the heavy lifting, and they're going to be really, really enthused. And then they say, just by the way, ballpark figure, if I wanted to move to Jerusalem, I wanted to buy a nice apartment, what would it cost? And then they're going to come with their tail between their legs, having realized that they probably can't afford that. And they're going to come to the Sderot table. So firstly, I would say in terms of property prices and the such like, and also there's some certain tax breaks for places like Sderot that are in the periphery, I would say there's definitely there's something to be found here. And I would also say, you know, and maybe this is where I've been quite lucky, is that a lot of people, they maybe it's the younger people, they make they make Aliyah to places like Tel Aviv. They're not sure necessarily work-wise what they're going to do. And they go, don't worry, people always need English speakers, which is true, but you're going to an area where there's so many English speakers. Whereas in Sderot, you know, anyone who can speak English, there will always be opportunities in the educational field here, because as I say, English is a real problem here. I know it's something the mayor is pushing on very hard. And in fact, I think it was JNF or Keren Ayasod have helped build an excellent centre here, which will be open shortly, which focuses on maths and English, because we all know those two things are how critical they are. So I think Sderot actually is a place that English people should consider, British people. I can tell you that a number of people sat down with us at the table. As I say, I came with the mayor and the woman who's in charge of absorption, and she was very clear. She said, if anyone gets in touch, we'll spend a day with you, show you around, help you, you know, understand what your opportunities are. But I think people should look at it actually. You know, also, even though it's in the south, I always say this to people. It's last night I went to the Maccabi Tel Aviv game in Bloomfield. We got the train, and it was 50 minutes on the train. We went to Tel Aviv. So even though it's in the south, the truth is it's the very north of the south, and you can be in Tel Aviv in 50 minutes. So yeah, I think they should look at it, Stephen. And if anyone obviously has got my email address from this Zoom, they can email me. If I can answer a question, I will. If they want to be put in touch with the woman who manages absorption and Aliyah within Sderot, I can obviously, she's far better qualified, of course.
Would you like me to circulate your email address as well?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
I know there was a lady before, and sorry that I've forgotten some of the names, that
Yeah.
said she obviously wanted to help in any way possible. Obviously, if she wanted to reach out to me on email,
Sure.
I can answer some more things,
Okay.
things she could do.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Clive, you know, you've been amazing. Firstly, you've given up your evening when you've got a new baby. So you know, I know from being a dad myself, although my babies are now 29 and 26, but when I first became a dad, all I wanted to do was to be with the babies. We shall let you go, but before we do, a very sincere thanks from all of us at the NJA, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of our guests who have joined us this evening. Thank you. You've given some amazing insight. We've watched some hard to watch stuff, and you've done an amazing job of talking us through that. And you know, your spirit is your ethos is very inspirational. Wish you all the luck in the world with you know, with being a new dad and with what you're doing with the children. Kol hakavod, and
Thank you, thank you.
hopefully next time I'm there, I'll drop by and
of course, sorry, that was the one last thing to
yeah.
say. Obviously, Dahlia knows that she can be in touch anytime.
Yeah.
Organize another visit, but of course, even if people were coming on an individual basis, if I can spare a bit of time, and I always try to, then anyone, of course, can be in touch if they're coming to Sderot, and I'll try and give them a tour reserved for English visitors.
Amazing. Okay, well, if you get an influx of Brits, you won't be the only Brit in Sderot any longer. But yeah, may that please God happen.
Thank you, Stephen.
All right, Clive, thank you very much.
Good night.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye-bye.